We're going to get to the position paper in just a minute, but I wanted to start with a question about UK-China relations now. Is the golden era that was touted in 2015 essentially over now?
So thank you for having me here today. Great question. Look, China is the UK's second largest trading partner outside of the EU. Bilateral trade last year grew 18%. It topped 80 billion sterling last year. If you added Hong Kong on, it's above 100 billion in trading. Exports grew last year by 34%. So I think it's difficult to say that the golden era is over. I think the opportunity on the trading side is how to continue to grow that. If you look at the continued growth curve, that is strong year-on-year growth. The question we ask sitting here within China is how do you accelerate that growth for the benefit of British businesses?
And one of the key lines from your position paper is a request to the governments of the UK and China to work together on trade and a free trade agreement between the two countries. Given everything that's happening around Huawei, where it looks like the UK may put in place measures to ban that company, and of course the sensitivities around Hong Kong and the UK position on the security law, how likely is it, do you think, really, that we're going to get to a point where the two sides sit down and start discussing an FTA?
But we obviously can't comment on the governments themselves and when they actually get into that room together. But what we can call for is informed and constructive engagement that is absent from political pressure. That is vital. And we'd certainly welcome an ongoing, robust debate around China, but it is critical that it be informed and that informed voices are heard equally and that assessments will be rational and objective. There undoubtedly remain areas where we have mutual shared interests across the UK and China. You know, one obvious area is combating climate change, and it ranges all the way through to global health. But there will obviously also be areas where we have different points of view, and these must be approached with informed and proactive engagement. Regarding the FTA itself, as I mentioned already, there's clearly a strong trading relationship that continues to grow. We see an importance of continuing to grow that. Now, the nations that have been prioritized already by the UK for a free trade agreement as we come out into this new Brexit environment are the EU, the US, which make total sense. They are the largest trading partners that the UK has. And they follow with Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, last year, the UK-Japan trade relationship totaled 31 billion, UK-Australia about 18 billion, New Zealand 2.9 billion. And as I said just now, China's within the mainland context was 80 billion, including Hong Kong, it's more than 100 billion. We certainly advocate for an informed discussion between the nations, and we should be robust in our positions, but we should also be balanced and look at the full picture right now on the economic benefit that comes to British businesses as we continue to engage with China.
China has threatened countermeasures to the UK over some of these issues, some of these contentious issues. To what extent are your members having to think about those potential countermeasures, particularly when we look at what Beijing has done to Australia over their calls for an independent investigation into the pandemic? Is this something now that your members are having to take on board? Are there things they can be doing to protect themselves if countermeasures are applied by Beijing?
Well, of course, every prudent business is looking at all options that are on the table. Now, what I can say, sitting in Beijing at this point in time, and having sat here through all of COVID-19 and for a lot longer before that, is that we're not seeing that coming through to businesses on the ground here. Now, you ask questions about Hong Kong, and of course, we look at that as well. But the fact is that further clarity on the details of what is being proposed are critical. The commentary right now is an emotional response to the potential of that, but we wait for real detail. And as I've said before, we believe that an informed and engaged dialogue between the UK and China is critical. Now, at a chamber, at a business side, what we are doing here is looking at how do we engage. We are doing our part to ensure that there is a productive environment here. And that is why out of the position paper that we just launched yesterday, we had 5 core recommendations. And we're continuing to push that in our dialogue with the UK government, with the Chinese government, to do our part from here to make a stronger environment for British businesses to succeed. And those 5 things include strengthening the implementation of market reforms across the country, addressing cybersecurity and IoT restrictions that continue to be a concern of British businesses, greater liberalization of capital accounts, addressing SOE's presence in the market, and, as you've already asked, about the FTA agreements.
Sinjin, I'm glad that you outlined that. So I was having a look at the five. Apart, I guess, from the FTA itself, I could take the date of these key recommendations and change it to 2010. It would still seem relevant. What's really changed among these things?
Now, look, a great observation and great comment. You know, I've sat here for many years, and it's been the same sort of repetition. But what I would say is that when we talk to members that are actually operating on the ground here, they will say that there has been a genuine change over the last number of years. Now, of course, as anyone sits here, words are one thing, actions are another, and actions count. And we have seen genuine movement on the opening up of certain areas. We see it in banking, we see it in healthcare, we see it in the expedited approvals of innovative new drugs, we see it in licensing. But this is a journey, and we cannot stand still. Now, for those that have been paying attention to the two sessions, the annual meeting that was held just 2 weeks ago, delayed since March, again, a lot of positive words about the opening up and a lot of framing around the road to recovery after COVID-19. Now, we continue to push hard for genuine enactment on those, but it would be a mistake to say that this is exactly the same environment as 5 years ago, as 10 years ago, as 20 years ago. It is not the same market, and that is why we continue to push for an informed, knowledgeable discussion between those that are on the ground doing business in China and those that are outside looking in.